So even from looking in the bay, you can see what we're going to be going and looking at today. That is a problem. All that right there happened at the last track day, and that's all bits of grease that came off of the axle from inside the boot. And going under the car, you can see that it is definitely wet down here. There is grease. See all that back up there on the firewall? We got some right up there on the boot. That's for the steering rack. That's a whole bunch of grease hanging on up in that. And then here up against the transmission as well. You see how it's flinging grease up there. So really what I'm trying to do down here is determine whether or not I can salvage this axle, just kind of repair this boot here some way, or do I need to go ahead and replace the whole axle, which of course I don't want to do, but you know, you got to do what you got to do. So what I'm thinking here is I'm just going to spin this wheel. We'll spin the axle around, and then we'll try to see what we see. And there's definitely some grease there. Not seeing any obvious tears yet. A lot of grease there. I'm still not really seeing anything obvious, so I'm just going to take this paper towel here and clean up these bits. And then I'm going to try to squeeze the rubber boot and see if there's any cracks that form that, you know, just aren't obvious as I'm spinning this thing. Almost looks like it's coming out from underneath the side of this clamp here. So this is strange. I am spinning the wheel here. You'll see this thing go around. I don't see anything obvious. I know I'm just giving you this one camera angle here, but I've looked at this thing at many different angles. That's kind of just hard to get the camera up into. And I'm kind of moving and flexing the thing, and I'm just not seeing anything. So what I'm going to try to do is actually turn the wheel, and then I'm going to see how this thing stretches out, you know, when the wheel is turned outwards and then inwards, and we'll see if we see anything then. Oh yeah. Let's go see. Love the Toyo R888Rs. 225. Alright, so we are all stretched out down here, full lock to the right. This inside boot does look good too, just so you know. It is not this one. Although that doesn't look great there, does it? But this thing is bone dry, as you see. But that could be on its way out. While we're here, let's just look. Yeah, you see kind of cracking all along there in the middle. That one's probably on its way out there, kids. Maybe this is helping me to answer my question of whether to fix or replace. We'll see. And, you know, it's not super stretched out when you do this, so, you know, it's still not really showing any obvious signs to me. So now here's where I'm at with this thing. I don't think there's any obvious cracks along the boot. I've really meticulously checked this thing off camera, and I've gone and checked every little crevice, kind of doing this, flexing it, seeing if I can see something like pinhole, you know? I'm not seeing anything. What I do see, and what kind of lines up with what I'm seeing back here, is this right here. The grease seems to be almost seeping out. It's kind of right in line. You see how it would throw it, boom, right back there, and boom, all up back there. I'm kind of thinking that's where it's at. When I move this back and forth, it almost just like wants to wiggle on out some grease. And I bet that's what's happening. Just from the sudden movements of throwing this thing around, you know, just that little bit. You see how it's kind of just pushing it out? I'm kind of just thinking the sudden movements of throwing this car around, you know, back and forth violently. It's kind of just wiggling the grease out of this axle. You see how it's kind of landing there? It makes sense why it was right up here on the transmission. And then, boom, it's hitting the boot back here from the steering rack. And then, boom, getting way up there on the firewall. So here we are the next day, and I did decide to go ahead and get another axle. Now, I had a couple options. I was looking at something, you know, a bit more pricey, something that was maybe a bit more oriented towards performance. You know, there are a bunch of different brands out there. That really didn't appeal to me for A, for the price, but B, because I just don't believe anyway that it's necessary in this moment, since I'm running stock horsepower, to have a super high performance axle. Let me show you what I got. Oh, this is what I ended up getting. It's one of those budget axles that you would see at any of your local auto parts stores. But it is a brand new piece. It is not a remanufactured something. Is that dumb? You know, it's a budget axle that's meant for daily driving, blah, blah, blah. It's not a performance-oriented piece. Every single time I've been out at the firm, I have not run performance axles. There's always been something budget. And yeah, you could say, hey, the boot ended up tearing on this one, but dude, who knows how old that axle was? I got that as part of that swap when I got that D16 however long ago. It's just one of those things where I think a standard OEM axle is going to be fine for my horsepower application. And, you know, if I'm proved wrong, then I'm proved wrong. But I think this thing is going to work out great. And there's also a big upside to buying one of these OEM style axles. Hello. So you can pretty much bring this thing in, no core charge. You bring it in with the receipt and they'll go ahead and exchange it out and give you a new one. Now, I know a couple of guys who do this out at the track, and, you know, not that they have to replace axles all the time, but if they ever do, they'll take it out, bring it on back, and hey, you can get another one popped in. And man, this thing was pretty cheap. After the discounts and everything, you know, that you can get through your local auto parts stores, this ended up being $65. So yeah, I'm gonna run it. We'll test it out when we get out to the firm, won't we? Love this thing right here, ball joint separator. I got some nice new ball joints on this thing from Hard Race, and that's the last thing I want to do is start blowing those. Got it. Alright, some comparisons. This one's the new, that one's the old. Old one looks, you know, just a bit rusty and stuff on the main shaft there. This one is interesting looking, but it just is what it is. We have the new axle nut here, of course, on the end. Everything looks good. You know, again, on the old one, it didn't really look like anything was totally cracking on the boots, but it seemed like this side right here is the side that was starting to fail. And so, yeah, I'm happy to just put a new one in there, and we'll see how it goes. And just so y'all know, I did put a new axle seal in there the last time I did this, so that's still looking good. And yeah, I'm just gonna reuse that. Okay, sorry for not filming much of this process, guys, but here's where I'm at. I still gotta push this thing in just a little bit more to butt it up against the case, but at least I got it in. It took a minute just to do that. If you've ever done an axle before, maybe you know. All right, man, holy cow, I got it. We are sitting nice and flush up against the trans there, as it should be. So even though it's nighttime here, I'm in my hot, humid garage, and mosquitoes are out, so I put the door down, and I'm just like, achoo. But oh my God. Essentially what I had to do was almost get on the end of it, like, you know, out by the outer wheel well here, and just kind of lean my body weight into it. When I'm just sitting there using shoulders, you know, I felt like I'm doing an overhead press, but on the ground. When I'm just doing shoulders, it's just burning out my shoulders, man. But I got a real good pump going, so that's cool. But I just had to lean my body weight, and it eventually just clicked. I was like, yes! And for all you suspension guys, see? It's jacked up to ride height. Gotta tighten it down. Proper. Got the castle nut. And finally, the cotter pin. I have the new axle nut here. Alright you guys, so got it all wrapped up. New axle is in, everything's buttoned up. I'm waiting on some Torco fluid that's gonna be coming in tomorrow. So I'm gonna go ahead and top that thing off, put the new fluid in the transmission, get the wheel back on, blah, blah, blah. Looking forward to getting out and driving this thing and giving you all of my impressions. See you in that one.